Hi, everyone. I'm here with Amanda White, who is a licensed therapist and the creator of the super popular and really awesome Instagram account, Therapy for Women. And Amanda, you kind of dubbed yourself the retired party girl. And I kind of want to intro you by sharing kind of why you are that person now.
Yeah, absolutely. I dubbed myself that because I used to be, I don't drink anymore. I've been sober for almost 8 years now. But to me, it's more than that. It's not, I don't identify as much as someone who's sober because so much happened during my partying phase. I struggled with my mental health. I struggled with an eating disorder. I struggled with people pleasing and boundaries. So I think a lot of that all kind of intersects when I just wasn't taking care of myself. And I think a lot of us relate to kind of having something that we did in the past that we've moved through, and it's shaped how we see the world and how we show up now.
When I love that. I don't think there's enough retired party people in general out there. I think it's really easy to socially drink and stuff. So I think that part of your story is so cool, especially when I was reading and researching more about you as this interview came up. And I think that's just a really cool part of your story. So thanks for sharing that. And
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, and I do want to talk about too, like just some of that. You talked about some behaviors that you had. I know something that you're familiar with is addictive behaviors. How do those get to happen? Like, where do they come from? And how am I supposed to recognize that it's maybe a healthy addictive personality, or maybe it's not? How are we supposed to distinguish between the two?
Yeah, I think the best way to understand an addictive pattern is it does serve a purpose in our life. And addiction can get this bad reputation as something that's, immoral or something that someone is, doing to harm themselves or others. But it's important to remember that someone wouldn't have started doing it if it wasn't helping control pain in some way, if it wasn't giving them a sense of control over their emotions or their life, or giving them an escape. So that's kind of how, it's a myth that there's an addictive personality. The truth is, addiction is complicated. It is a variety of different factors, and some of us are more genetically predisposed to it. And also, you know, um, if you've been through trauma, depending on how you're raised, if you grew up around, certain substances, that can definitely make it more likely that you'll turn to that substance or develop an addictive behavior. But it's complicated, so it's hard to know.
Well, and two, I think a lot of us know about the ones like alcohol and drugs, but I think there's more to it than that, right? So, what are the other types of addictions we can have that maybe we just don't realize we could have?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole kind of classification of process addictions, which is kind of like we get addicted to the process of doing something. So often, kind of common process addictions you hear about are gambling, the process of kind of gambling. Eating disorders can end up kind of as a process addiction. The idea of starving ourselves, changing our bodies, how we look can be very addictive. But even stuff kind of like overworking, working really hard, people pleasing, those can all be patterns that we get stuck in because, again, it is serving a purpose for us.
Well, and I think it's so interesting too of the people pleasing because I'm an empath. That's something that's a
Yeah.
big part of my personality. And so people pleasing happens often. But as I've gotten older, I've realized the importance of also like, and it feels weird saying this way, but pleasing myself, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that I'm also happy in that process, which is so much harder to do than we think it is. And something I do that I want like kind of your opinion on,
Yeah.
one of my coping strategies that I've always seen that I tend to do, whether I'm angry, sad, happy, anything. My natural thing is to eat my comfort foods. Like that
Yeah.
is my number one thing. Is that something that's healthy or is that normal? Where does that fall on this kind of category of coping behaviors?
It's a very normal thing. The truth is, we're biologically wired to seek comfort when we're having big emotions. If you think about being a child, we often seek, whether that's physical comfort from our parents, whether it's just like getting into bed when you're young, you seek comfort. So it completely makes sense. I think the hard part is when we become so in the habit of it that we don't have other coping skills as well. So I'm really against like the demonizing of like comfort food. I think that can happen sometimes on social media and things like that. And I want people to really know it's a normal, natural thing that your brain is wired to do. But yeah, it's important to also look at the bigger picture and recognize, is this actually helping me? If you're angry, do you actually feel less angry afterwards? And what else could you also do maybe at the same time or before or after? So I often look at things rather than just trying to cut something out. I like to think of what else could we add to support you or someone in those moments.
Interesting. So it's something that could be still okay to do, but maybe just as long as it's with some other things that I'm not just utilizing that one strategy to get me through.
Exactly. Because yeah, everything that we do is going to have, right, like pros and cons to it. So it's important to also look at, yeah, what other things might you be able to do? And maybe certain emotions, it may be more helpful to do other coping skills.
Yes, I totally agree. And I also picked up boxing like 4 years ago. That's a huge strategy for
I
me
love
too.
that.
Do you feel like working out is one of those? I know that's also a hard balance for people as well.
It can be a hard balance, but I mean, the research is really clear that exercise can be extremely beneficial. Just moving your body in general, obviously, like you kind of alluded to, if it's becoming, you are become obsessed with changing your body, losing weight, doing things like that. But even it can be, your form of exercise could be walking, it could be stretching, it could be, doing yoga, doing something that's not super high impact also.
Yes.
But we do know that endorphins really help us, and being able to release that energy really can help your brain process difficult emotions.
So basically, Legally Blonde was correct in telling us like endorphins are what makes us happy, right? We need to release
Yes.
those and get them out.
Yeah.
And so
Happy people may still shoot their husbands, but endorphins do help with your mental health for sure.
yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. As soon as anybody says endorphins, I have to immediately bring up Legally Blonde every time.
Absolutely.
I do want to kind of change
Yeah.
subject here too. From high school, I dealt with some really intense bullying, and it was tied
Mm.
to a lot of body issues for me growing up. And I don't think there's a woman I've met in my life that doesn't deal with some kind of body image issues, right? Whatever that looks like, however that came to be, everybody deals with it in a different way. What are some steps that you suggest for any of us who feel that body image is a struggle to just kind of start to get out of that constant negativity space?
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. I think it's something that women especially struggle with because we are objectified much more in the media. So what happens often is we start to objectify ourselves. So self objectification is when you kind of pick apart your body and you imagine, right? Like maybe you're getting dressed, right? And you imagine what someone is thinking about how you look, or, you're slumped over in a chair and you like correct yourself because you don't want anyone to see a certain angle of you. That is
Mhm.
objectifying yourself. So one thing that we can do kind of to snap out of that is to stop looking at ourselves as just body parts and try to look at ourselves as a whole holistic being. And when you notice yourself maybe like in the mirror, body checking or checking out different angles, trying to come back to wearing things that make you feel comfortable, wearing things that make you feel like you, that make you feel beautiful. I mean, a big thing I say to people often is, if you had the body you loved, if you were totally confident in how you felt, how would your life be different? What would you wear? What would you do? What would you say? And then try to practice that, even if you're in a body that you don't feel that way in yet.
And it kind of like almost tricking yourself into thinking you are there. Is that kind of a way of doing that? You're like, that's actually how I really feel, but I'm constantly telling myself that's not actually how I feel. Is that kind of like you're just kind of
That's
rewiring your
part of
brain?
it. Yeah. Well, to change, I mean, a big thing that holds people back is they think they need to be ready mentally before they take a different action. And the
Okay.
truth is, often we have to take that action first, and our mindset can follow that change later. We can't like think our way into better body image. We have to start taking action. So that's part of it for sure. And also, I think the question can help people like illuminate and think about what actually would change. Because so often we can just think, well, I would be happy if I were thinner. I would be happier if, this body part looked different. But what would that actual, like, how would your life actually change? And we can get into, would you go, would you go to the beach? Would you go to the pool? Would you play with your kids? Would you take more photos of yourself? And how is body image really holding you back?
I do think too, there's a connection as women too that we've been taught. Not only have we been objectified so much, but also we've been told not to love ourselves. We've been
Yeah.
told, if we take too many pictures of ourselves or if we do things that make us feel good, we are, narcissistic or we are
Yeah.
too much into ourselves. And I do feel like as we keep having these conversations and women keep talking about, oh, we're all feeling this way. There's this huge empowerment happening of like, no, we deserve to feel that way about ourselves. Are you seeing that kind of happen right now in after especially all these conversations keep happening?
I am. I am. I think it's a good change. And I'm excited to see more like women kind of taking back the idea too that like your hobbies matter. Like what you like matters, even if other people think it's dumb or they're not interested in it. It's okay to like what you like. It's okay to be basic. It's okay to, enjoy things that maybe other people don't. And it makes me so sad when people are struggling with their mental health. People struggle to find things they care about these days and love. And what we don't need is a bunch of people telling women what is okay for them to care about or be interested in. I just want people to do what they like and what brings them joy.
Yes, and it's so refreshing to hear that too because I think I've tried so hard to be in the mindset of I never make comments on the internet. I never say things to people in person if it's something I wouldn't feel comfortable hearing
Yeah.
because I don't ever want to deter someone from doing something that makes them happy. Even if I don't get it, even if I don't understand,
Yeah.
I am never going to speak something, let it come out of my mouth to stop someone else from doing that. And it's refreshing to hear and have conversations with other people, especially other women, that they're trying to also do that same thing and just create this environment that is really positive out into the world, not even just in our own space, but in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I do like this brings up this other topic I wanted to talk to you about. I had this crazy idea and I got some like controversial hair miss on it. So I want to know what you think. So when you have a decent following on social media, that could be 1,000 followers, that could be multiples, whatever that looks like. There's trolls, right? There are negative things that come into that space regardless of who you are. And so I came up with the idea to allow the people who wanted to comment on my body or comment very negative things to me that weren't, helping me in any way. There's constructive criticism and then there's trolling, right?
Yeah.
So if they were trolling, I would let them stay up for 24 hours. And then whoever liked it, I blocked all of them, including the post and the people that liked it. Pure savagery, I know. But I was like, this is not working anymore. I had to do something.
Yeah.
And 50% of people were like, yes, this makes sense. But then there was 50% who are like, no, like you're not taking that well. So I'm just so curious your thought on that. And do you think we need to allow I believe in constructive criticism, but I do not believe negativity around me. So I'm just kind of curious on your take on it all.
That's a really good point. And I completely get it. I get, seeing the people who like it and not liking it. And I think the funny thing is if you asked me this on a different day, my answer may change depending on how I'm feeling about social media. I mean, I'm definitely a big believer in blocking, trolls and stuff like that. Most people are not interested in having a conversation. And I used to really try, and I just don't have the brain power for it anymore.
Yeah, the energy, right? Like I don't have the energy to keep teaching you things.
Yes. When you don't want to be taught, you don't.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's your page, and I think you get to do what you want with your page. And if you don't want people, I mean, I think some people prioritize leaving up a post that garners a lot of negativity because they know that it's also more likely to get more engagement. And some people can sit in that and tolerate it. And I'm just someone, I've learned this about myself, like it's not worth it. Maybe I'll get more engagement. Maybe I'll get a couple extra 100 followers or whatever. It's just not worth my mental health to watch the trolling and the picking. And then I feel bad for followers who feel like they need to defend me, and I don't want them to have to do it. So if I have a particularly, post that's getting particularly bad, I'll turn comments off because sometimes I can't deal with it. I think it's hard when people like it. Sometimes people are like snarky. And I think sometimes there's a difference between snark and a troll. But I also get it. I've blocked on certain topics that are really important to me. And certain comments that were really negative and people liked them. I've also done that before.
Well, and too, I sat with it, especially after I put it out into the world and told people I was doing it right. I sat with it because there was somebody that asked, they're like, do you think that just doesn't allow you to have different opinions? But I'm like, no, I think in my personal life, I have so much of that. I have very healthy relationships that do not let me get too egotistical. They're very healthy situations around me that people on the internet doing that doesn't really benefit me in any way. Right. But I just am so curious on that and talking about, because there is toxic positivity too. Right. There's this very
and you can create an echo chamber for yourself if you really wanted to.
Yes.
On social media too. But yeah, I think like you're saying, there's a difference between constructive criticism. There's a difference between someone asking a question. My guess is too, you follow people who have differing opinions than you. I mean, no one has the exact same opinions. So I think that all matters. And there's a difference between seeing someone have a different opinion than you and you being the one who said something and having to deal with other people having a direct conversation with you, right? Like you're not saying every person that follows you needs to support you, write a positive comment, like you. You're just saying like, if you don't agree, don't like it. Like, let it go.
well, like this is a great
or
example.
Unfollow you.
Yes, please. Like I'll post speaking of body, we're talking about that. I'd post a food recipe video and somebody would comment on my weight. I'm like, that is not what this video is about. No. I'm not sitting here asking your opinions on if I look good. I'm telling you a recipe that I love so we can bond over food. And I try to create that space that's just people can connect rather than this. Internet is so easy to get caught up in everything that's happening. So I try to make sure my page is a place of authentic, just love for one another. And so I'm glad to know I have some support and that it's not the most savage thing, but I do agree in that it could create an echo chamber. So if anybody does decide to do it, make sure you are at least having conversations in your personal life, I would say, right?
And if you want feedback, like I think there's a difference too between people don't read posts all the way, right? They're so quick. And sometimes I think too, it's important if like when I ask for engagement on a post, I may say, do you relate to this? Or do you have a question about this? And it's like, answer the question that's being asked. Right? Like to your point, you said like, probably like, what do you think of this recipe? Or are you going to try it? You didn't say, what do you think of my body?
Yes.
So that also matters.
Yes. It's the undisclosed unwanted opinions that are tend to be the situation on there. But I wanted to just
Yeah.
get a perspective from you because I did get at least 50% of people who were like, I feel like this is not right. And I'm like, I don't really feel that way.
Well, if they don't have a following and they don't also understand what it's like to get hundreds of opinions every day, I think that you can't totally understand. Like, yes, one or two unsolicited, opinions is fine. But when you have a following and you start getting tons of people doing it over and over again, it drains you.
Yes. And I think it's really awesome of people who can just tolerate all of that, but I have learned I am not one of those people. I take on, and the whole empath side of me, I take on everything. Something comes at me, I start breaking it down and I'm like, how can I fix it? What can I do
Yeah.
better? Is this about me? And you know, speaking of taking things less personally, I know you kind of
Yeah.
touch on this a lot. I want to know like world of social media and just in person too, but how can we try to not take things so personally?
Yeah. I mean, I will say it's very difficult, and I don't think anyone can do it 100% perfectly. My best tip for it, what I do and what I teach clients to do is when someone gives you a piece of feedback or says something that's particularly difficult for you, I would write down on a piece of paper what the person said. And then on the other side of the piece of paper, write down what is your interpretation of what they said. Because words are painful for sure. And a lot of times, what keeps us up at night, what really stings, is the interpretation of what that means. So, right, if someone says, to me that they hate my advice, or they think that I shouldn't be talking about not drinking because not everyone is an alcoholic or whatever, right? If that bothers me, my interpretation of that might mean that I'm going to lose all my clients and not be able to be a therapist anymore, or other people on my page are going to turn against me too when they see that comment, or maybe I shouldn't have written a book. I don't know. So really trying to think of what's that meaning you're adding to what someone said to you.
Oh, that's such a good tip and really hard to do too. It's really hard to like take it out of your head and your
Yeah.
emotions and just leave it as what was said. And I think too, like something that I've struggled with in the topic of social media, I am a digital director. So when people don't engage with my stuff that are my friends and family, it hurts my
Yeah.
feelings. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why does that hurt my feelings? This shouldn't matter because I know that in person in my life, they support me wholeheartedly. So, and I know that people can relate to that too with their businesses. I'm sure,
Mhm.
small business, if people don't buy from them that are their friends and family or whatever that looks like, why do we feel that? Why does that feel like such a personal attack on who we are?
It's a great question. And I think you're right. I think it's very, very common. It's something I've experienced as well. I think people get interested and think of support as a one-time thing. They think of if they like one of your posts when you first start an account, or maybe they buy something from you initially, they think support is a one-time thing and that they've supported you. Where I think when you're in your business, you're on social media every day, especially if you're having a hard day, you're looking to those people to kind of be your rock and be there and support you in those moments. And you're looking for it online, even if and it's important to look at how they're showing up for you offline, I think, because at the end of the day, they're your support. They're not probably even your ideal customer. That's something I think that's important to remind ourselves of. So they may not love your content as much as someone else because you're not creating it for them.
Yeah.
So I think looking at how else they show up for you, because you can get a lot of people to buy your products, but not everyone is going to like support you and listen to you when you're having a bad day or you feel like your business is imploding. Um, and most people don't think, they unfollow or they don't like, they scroll past social media so quickly, they don't even think about it. Where when you're creating on there, you're looking at every single like, you're really seeing, you're tracking your sales. and they're just living their day. They're not thinking about whether they liked something you wrote or not.
Yeah. And I heard you mention too that obviously take a look at what they're doing in real life. And if they're showing up there, that's what really counts. But how do we, kind of take ourselves out of that and remove the ego from that? I think that's kind
Mhm.
of what we need to do, right? Is removing that ego. How
Yeah.
do we do that in that situation that seems so emotional? Because for so many people, work is this large part of their life.
Yeah.
How do we remove that? How do we keep moving and not let that do what it does so often?
I think trying to remember, like so often, right, we see one thing and we make it mean, right? Like I was saying, all these other things. So I think if you can think about maybe there's someone in your life and maybe they're not liking your posts or supporting things as much as you want, what is going on in their life? Like trying to create empathy and put yourself in their shoes and imagine what other things they're dealing with on a daily basis that may be impacting their behavior. Because the truth is, we all, and this is how we're wired to be, we all care about ourselves, obviously, the most, which makes sense. We're in our own lives. So, if you're a business owner, you care about your business the most. And other people are kind of have other things that they care about the most, as it should be. So, trying to also remember what other things are going on in their life that may be impacting how they feel, how they show up. Not everyone is like an online person, not everyone loves being on social media. Not everyone loves, buying things from friends. Some people feel like it's a weird thing. So trying to think of maybe what other beliefs do they have that may be impacting their behavior as well.
Well, you keep giving me so much to talk about. This is, the whole reason you came on is to make all of us keep thinking and keep growing, right? And I love it. But gosh, I'm like thinking about these things and I'm like, yes, I need to do all of this a lot. And I want to talk to you too. And the reason I keep putting myself on Front Street is because I hope it connects with someone, right? All of
Yeah.
these things are things I deal with, but I know it's out there. And if I can just say, hey, I'm dealing with it too, hopefully it connects to other people, right? So, another part of my life story is that pretty much every relationship up until now that I've been in, I was cheated on, right? You
Yeah.
touched on body image issues and it all kind of connects in this sense. So, I'm in a new relationship, it's great, and I've worked through all my trauma, I did the hard work, I put in the time. But I think it's important to also talk about that you can work so hard, get in a new relationship, and still deal with what happened in the past a lot,
Yes.
even if you've perfectly went through all your growth period, right? And so I'm kind of seeing what advice you may have for those who have struggled with maybe cheating in past relationships or just bad past relationships, and it caused them to have insecurities about themselves and like how to feel good in a really new healthy relationship because I think it's not talked about enough.
Yeah. I think my first piece of advice is for everyone to give themselves a break. I think that we may have unrealistic expectations for ourselves if you've been through, like you were talking about, relationships where you've been cheated on multiple times. It's going to impact you because, right, people probably told you or you told yourself it's not, like, don't worry about it. It's not happening. And you react differently when something that you were thinking about actually gets proven to be true. Multiple times makes it even more difficult. So this may always be something, I think there's this idea like healing is amazing, trauma work is amazing. We can change our lives and do, be different people. And at the same time, this is kind of like a scar for you. And it may always be something that's a little bit in the background. And it may be something where it's a little more difficult for you to open up and trust people. And I think as much as you can, trying to rely on if the person's actions and words are in alignment and trying to stay in the present moment of the relationship as much as you can. And you may need more support from that person too. I think it's important to share if you're at that point in a relationship about our past so that that person can be a little more understanding and reassure us. But it may always be a scar, like a real scar on your body that never totally goes away. It can be clean and not have an infection and not be, bleeding anymore, but there may always be a scar there.
Well, and I think it's cool to connect with people to know that that exists, right? Because we feel like, at least I know that I felt like when leaving a relationship, I'm like, okay, I've got through that one. I'm moving on to the new one. This is clean slate. But that's not the case. Like we all come
Yeah.
with baggage and we all come with flaws and things that have happened in the past. And yes, to your point, we can all work through them as much as we want, but it's still going to be there, and I feel so often because there's young girls that will write in DMs and ask me like, how did you get through this? And
Mm,
there really isn't a one fix all answer,
yeah.
right? Like so what do you think for women who maybe like right now in this relationship turmoil, especially with the dating world the kind of way it is, can they like move through? What are some, I guess, steps? I keep asking you for steps and tips, but I think it's so important to have tools,
Yeah.
and especially with someone who you have created such an awesome environment for women.
Hmm.
So what are some things that you do that kind of help women through these phases?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing is to start to understand what some of your triggers are. Explore what are, things that have bothered you in past relationships. What are some signs? What are things that you're especially sensitive to so that you can kind of be mindful of those that come up in a relationship for you. And I think really starting to learn how to manage how you feel. I mean, I think emotional regulation is one of the most important skills all of us can learn. Most of us were never taught how to process our emotions, how to sit through our emotions, or anything like that. So if you can start to understand what some of those pain points are, what things tend to get you, your nervous system activated, where you kind of when our nervous system gets really activated, we're not able to kind of tap into our rational brain. We're not able to think super clearly or make super well thought out decisions. So it's important to start to be able to notice when that happens to us so we can pause. We can maybe go for a walk, take a shower, lay down on the floor, stretch, do something to kind of regulate your nervous system and bring yourself back down before you maybe have a conversation with someone. So
And
those are some of the tools I teach. Yeah.
yeah, I love that too. I mean, I know as I've gotten older, my regulating of my nervous system has changed so much. It used to be going for long drives, listening to music, and now it's fetal position while my shower goes down on me. Like the,
Yes.
the difference in time. But I think so many of those things are really helpful. And, especially too, those, and, in those past relationships for me also came abuse. So that there's deep trauma there, right?
Yeah.
And, um, surprisingly there's so many more women that go through that don't feel comfortable talking about it. So I like creating a space for people to feel like they can listen to this and have the resources to at least put one foot in front of the other and move
Yeah.
forward. Too, I want to touch on that and see from your perspective, you working with so many women too. I know you've seen so much across the board in relationships. What are some, and it's a you see them also all over social media because everybody has different ones. But what are some red flags maybe we should
Hmm.
also be looking for in the dating world too?
I mean, I think the biggest one is whether someone's actions match up with their words. I think it's really easy, and a lot of people can say lots of things on first dates or initial conversations, and make women, especially, feel really, really special, because they're still getting to know you and stuff. And if their words are not being backed up by actions, I literally, in the beginning of a relationship, think go by actions less than what someone says, because anyone can say anything, but their actions really are what matters. And I think another important thing to remember is often people are the most the best version of themselves very early in the relationship. They're typically the most polite, the most understanding, the most kind, the most considerate in that beginning stage because they want you to like them. So if they are not able to be what you want in terms of understanding or kind or any of those things in those first few dates, it's not going to get better from there.
Well, and I used to feel like I had a foolproof way of finding out if a guy is a good one. And that was like how they treated animals, how they treated a person living with homelessness, and someone in the service industry. That was like my foolproof thing. And I learned very quickly that that was not enough to establish what somebody really was. It's a great starting place, right? It's a great, if they can handle those things and they're good people, then it's a bonus start. But I learned very quickly, and I got tricked in thinking that would show me somebody is good. So I like to see from your perspective what that actually looks like for other people to know the red flags and what they're actually paying attention to, instead of my thing that was definitely not foolproof in the end.
Well, I think too, right? People aren't all good or bad. So I think also sometimes people can be a fine person, but they're not the right match for you. So I think that's important also, is if you have been in a few relationships, thinking back to like what worked in that relationship, what qualities did they have that did, make the relationship work, and what are some qualities that absolutely don't work. And really, I think focusing on, I tell people like maybe picking 5 important qualities for you and everything else is kind of bonus. I think we can get so caught up in all these different characteristics we want, but at the end of the day, it really matters what works for you. What, might be a trigger for you, might not be a trigger for me. What bothers one person in a relationship doesn't bother someone else, and trying to use your past history as a lesson for what you need in a future relationship.
Yeah. And too, we see it a lot on social media with some celebrity couples, and I'm not going to sit here and name them. But toxic relationships are also a part of this, that are very, we're seeing more of it, I feel like, on social media. What is a way to make sure that you don't put yourself in that? Like, if you feel a toxic situation coming on, how can you kind of remove yourself and not get into it? Because those are hard to get out of, just as much as, a really close trauma bond type relationships, an abusive relationship. Toxic is all the same in that category.
It's on the spectrum for sure. Yeah. And a lot of toxic relationships become abusive given enough time. I mean, I think some of the biggest qualities that are important to look for is someone who's willing to say that they're wrong, someone who is willing to say they made a mistake, own up to it, take feedback. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's this unhealthy belief that there's only one person right out there for us, and love is all you need. And really, we need a lot more than love. And one of the most important qualities for a relationship working long term is being able to give and receive feedback, is being able to have healthy communication skills. So those, I think, are some of and almost every toxic or abusive relationship, one person is not able to apologize, not able to take feedback, not able to change their behavior if they do something that someone doesn't like. And they don't have good communication skills.
Yes. And I think I don't want to end on that note. So I also want to add, because I think this is all so important for people to hear, because again, we don't talk about it enough. And if we start putting it out there, maybe some people can recognize that they're in these situations and get out of it early.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the hope, right?
Yep.
But I do want to throw some like positivity out in the world too. Like, you've created such an awesome brand for yourself in the sense of being that retired party girl, but it's also just you've created this life that you really love.
Yeah.
So, in a few words, how did that kind of happen for you, and how can others start to kind of create a life that they would really love?
I think it stems from thinking about I think so many of us can get caught in this is who I am. Like, I was caught for a long time in, I'm a party girl, I have an eating disorder, I'm a drunk, whatever. And I think people really underestimate that, yes, some of your personality is fixed, but a lot of it is also what you want and what you like, what you want to choose to do with your life and how you want to show up. And if people can think about what values are important to them in their life, how do they want their life to look? And then start thinking about what action they can take. Like part of why I stopped drinking was because I really wanted healthy friendships, deep, important friendships in my life. And I was not a good friend when I was drinking. I would desert people at bars. I was super flaky. And I realized that if I wanted to have those friendships and I wanted to have good self-esteem, I had to start doing things that didn't make me feel terrible about myself. So I think, yeah, some of it is just also, you're not stuck the way that you are. It may feel that way. It doesn't mean it's easy. But if you want something, if you want to be a better friend, if you want to have more self-esteem, if you want to be in a relationship, you can start taking action towards those things.
I think that's such a good thing to end on too, because it's incredibly important to take action for yourself, not only for this you, but past you, future you, all deserves it.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for joining me, hanging out with me, answering all of my crazy questions about everything from serious to happy. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Morgan.